Joining us right now to talk about UFC 265 tonight, ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Of course, he is a friend of the show. John Morgan from USA Today, MMA Junkie, joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN. John, how you doing out there?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Been enjoying another week in Houston. You know, we were here just a couple of months ago, but getting ready for it should be a good night of fights.
It should be. And before we get to the specific fights, I do have to ask you about the fight that's not going to be on the card, and that is, we wanted to see Amanda Nunes. I know Pena's out there. She was asking Dana White the other day, hey, Dana, where's Amanda? But it seems like, because of the UFC protocols and because of everything that goes with that, it's kind of like a TBD right now for Amanda, correct?
Yeah, no question about it. And more so even than just protocol. I mean, basically, she tested positive for COVID-19. Her entire family did. And apparently they actually had a pretty decent bout with it. Sometimes people get it and they're asymptomatic or whatever, know what I mean? But she actually dealt with it a little bit. So it took her out of training, wasn't able to prepare for this fight. From what we understand, she is negative at this point, which is great. She's cleared it. She's gotten through it. And Juliana Pena was actually saying, well, hey, if she's negative, get her down here. But it's like, hey, Juliana, she hasn't been training. She was recovering from this issue for a little bit, so we got to get this thing rescheduled. Yeah, but Juliana's a little spark plug, man. She's fun. She likes to stir the pot a little bit. She wants to get her title shot booked again as quickly as possible. So I think we'll get it. We'll get it later this year. We just don't know exactly when yet.
Okay, so that's good. So at least we're going to get it at some point later this year. And I know there's a lot of these cards, in November and December that are still outstanding on locations, and some of the. So I'm assuming maybe she'll land on one of those cards. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's just, again, it's the whole world is just unpredictable right now. It's the reality of what we do. I think a lot of us just like to talk sports and don't really want to talk COVID. I mean, we're exhausted of this thing a year and a half later, but the reality is it's still impacting things. Obviously, as you're seeing governments and, international governments, state governments, make changes as to what's available, what's not, travel restrictions, all that. It's still very much affecting the UFC schedule. So, there's some upcoming dates that we just don't know where they'll take place yet. But the UFC does have options. Of course, Vegas is still remaining open right now. Arizona has been welcoming. Florida, obviously here in Texas and Houston, where I'm at, again, like I said, second time we've been here in 3 months because they've remained open. So, we'll get it booked. I mean, the good thing is the dates will roll on. The UFC, if nothing else, has the Apex right on its own facilities. That means there's no crowd, unfortunately, because it's not a big facility, but it's at least a place that can host some fights. So the good news is the fights will go on. We just don't know exactly where yet.
You mentioned the Apex. Before we get to the crowd, I want to ask you about that. It seems to me, watching, is that basically the UFC is, for lack of a better term, that they're almost using the Apex, because they used to have fight nights everywhere. You would travel around, but now it's only the pay-per-views that are in different locations. And it's almost like the Apex is turning into like a cost-saving measure for the UFC in some ways. Is that fair to say?
It really is. It's kind of a side benefit that I don't think they really anticipated. But, I've heard some rumblings behind the scenes like, this sure is a lot easier. We don't have to get out there and sell tickets. We don't have to go to market after market, week after week. You don't have to pay for all the travel that's included in there. The hotel costs that are included for fighters and staff and everything else. I mean, there's actually talk of building a hotel on the campus of the UFC headquarters in Las Vegas where they could be completely enclosed. So it is a cost-saving measure. But I will say this, I've talked to Dana about this a couple times. I said, do you ever envision a way where this just becomes the way of the future? And he says, look, it is nice. It's convenient. It's a great fallback position. However, the thing that helped this product grow was getting the product out in front of people. I mean, when you go to a UFC live event for the first time and you see what a tight production they have and what an amazing high energy type situation it is, you get hooked. That's when you say, oh, I love this sport, man. I'm gonna be into this more. So I don't think Dana ever envisions a time where they would, only do it at the Apex, because I think he likes, having it out in front of the fans and, again, traveling it around and letting people in new areas get a chance to see it for the first time. But the Apex has been an absolute godsend for the UFC. As Dana said, we certainly didn't build it with a pandemic in mind, but we got it open right before the pandemic, and what a blessing it's been for him.
Now, you mentioned the world we live in right now because of protocols and pandemic and everything, and you could argue that tonight's main event is in many ways a byproduct of the environment we live in, because I got to be honest with you, I don't know if the Frenchman is actually fighting for an interim belt if it wasn't for the Apex, right? And if it wasn't for a lot of things that opened up, and, whether you believe in Ngannou's side or Dana's side, whatever it is, Derek Lewis was supposed to be next in line potentially fight for a belt with Jon Jones still flapping in the wind out there. And now you got the Houston hometown guy versus the Frenchman in Cyril Gane. And I would argue that this is a fascinating fight. But, John, would we really have this fight if it wasn't for it being 2021?
Yeah, no, we wouldn't. That's just the reality of the situation. Is they knew that they were coming back to Houston. It was one of the few places they could go. Now, normally a city wouldn't host pay-per-views 3 months apart, but there's so few options to go right now. And Houston was saying, "Hey, let's come back. Let's do another one." Well, when you get on Houston, hey, who's the biggest star you can put in Houston? Because before it was the first one that they'd been here in a long time. So yeah, it sells out no matter who's on the card because people are just itching to see the UFC. But when you spent that money to go to that event and enjoy it, and then you come back 3 months later, now you got to give me something different. It's not the name alone. The UFC brand isn't going to sell it for me. Now I got to be hooked. So what do? They turn to Derek Lewis, the hometown guy. He's the biggest star here. They put their hometown guy in there, and they're like, hey, we need a title. And listen, they were trying to get the Francis Ngannou fight here. I heard they had some initial agreements that Ngannou said, yeah, we'll do it. We'll do Ngannou Lewis, here in Houston. Let's go. And then for whatever reason, scheduling became an issue. They said, well, no, we can't do August. We'd like to do September. And it's like, well, look, we're going to Houston in August. We can't do September. We need it in August. So it became, a little bit of a battle of wills there. But the UFC's got shows to put on. So they said, look, if you're not willing to do it, fine. We'll just put an interim title on the line. So who's the next best in the division? And it is Cyril Gane. I mean, he's very early in his UFC career, but man, he's gotten the test and he's earned the right to be here. The interim title that's on the line here, it's very much just a product of the UFC scheduling. They want this to be a title fight, and they want Derek to earn, that title shot because again, he was supposed to fight Francis Ngannou. And while it's an interim title, and to be honest, nobody likes interim titles, everybody just kind of immediately says, well, I want the real belt. This isn't blah, blah, blah. It does come with some financial incentives. You do get pay-per-view points and bigger salaries and all that. So it's still, look, as you said, it's an intriguing fight. It's a clash of styles. Even though Cyril Gane probably shouldn't have been in this fight, I think he's the favorite in the fight. So I think he could very easily upset Derek Lewis. If he does that and goes on to win, he'll face Francis Ngannou. They used to be training partners years ago. So that's an intriguing storyline. So it's a good fight. But the fact that it's an interim title fight is very much a product of it being 2021.
John Morgan joining us here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN, lead reporter for MMA Junkie and USA Today, joining us to talk about UFC 265. Now, this guy Cyril Gane, a lot of the casual intermediate fan, they might not really have any. They know who Derek Lewis is, Black Beast, talks about how, he's got to go take a dump after a fight, right? All that kind of stuff. But Gane is a guy most people don't know, and reality is he actually hasn't been fighting that long. So tell us the folks about who Cyril Gane is and why they should care.
Yeah, it's been a real kind of meteoric rise, but not necessarily the highlight reel filled one. He's a French kickboxer who did great in Muay Thai, and then he transitioned over to MMA, and he's undefeated in MMA thus far. He came to the UFC very, very early. They continue to give him bigger and bigger tests. They continue to give him higher and higher ranked opponents, and he wins. There's some criticism of his style. While he is a heavyweight striker and he does have power, anybody with that size does, he's not the knockout artist that you think of with Derek Lewis, where he's going to come in and land one shot and knock you out. He's more of a combination style, rhythm, move in and out. He moves a lot faster than most of the heavyweight division. He seems a lot smoother and more athletic than a lot of these heavyweights. So, what he's going to try to do tonight is to try to stick and move and to outpoint and to stay away from that big right hand of Derek Lewis. And that's where it comes in. It's been interesting because his last two fights have been technical masterpieces. But, in a lot of ways, like you think of Floyd Mayweather, one of the all-time boxing greats, right? Like an unbelievable tactician, but not always the most exciting fighter, right? You tune in for a Floyd Mayweather fight, you're looking for a display of boxing, but you may not necessarily be standing on your feet, wowed at all the action that's going on. And that's what Cyril Gane has been able to do. But the interesting thing about it is those performances he's had, while they've been technical masterpieces, they've been at the UFC Apex, and they haven't been with any fans in there. So he hasn't been getting mercilessly booed throughout the course of 5 rounds. When he goes in there tonight trying to outpoint Derek Lewis, I promise you the Toyota Center is going to be booing him and trying to will some more action to happen. Can he stay disciplined at that point, or does he try to push a little bit? Does he make a little bit of a mistake that allows Derek Lewis to land that one big shot? That's kind of what we're going to be looking at tonight. It's Derek Lewis looking to land that one big knockout blow versus Cyril Gane is going to be trying to stick and move, and stay away from that big right hand.
Yeah, and I remember, it was back in May when Rose Namajunas won the belt back. And I remember the coaches for Zhang Wei Li said that, hey, the crowd affected her. The crowd got into her head. And, I kind of have to wonder, you just mentioned, Gon's been fighting in front of basically nobody. Would that happen to him? Could that happen to him? Because if it could happen to somebody like Zhang Wei Li, who you would think would have the mental fortitude to go out there, I can't assume that Cyril Gane is immune of that as well.
That's what I'm looking to see, and I agree with you 100% because I have been impressed with his ability to stick to a game plan. I mean, every fighter in the UFC knows that what fans want to see, what Dana White wants to see, is finishes. You want to see knockouts, you want to see submissions. Those are the highlight reel things. I've been impressed in his last two fights that those openings didn't really present themselves and how disciplined he stayed to the game plan. I thought, man, that's a guy that trusts in the plan, that trusts in the process, that trusts in his corner, and isn't deviating from the game plan. And he's not getting the highlight reel finishes, but he's getting the wins that are getting more money, that are getting more opportunities, and I've been very impressed with it. But this is going to be a hostile environment, as you said. I mean, it's going to be tough. So can he stay that disciplined in here? I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued to see it. I am picking Cyril Gane in this fight, man. I just do think he's the technically better fighter, and he has the ability to again, remain disciplined and stick to a game plan. But Derek Lewis has the ability to finish fights, in minute 1 and in minute 25 with one shot. And that's what makes this so exciting. And again, either man that wins, it's going to be a great fight with Francis Ngannou as well. There's going to be great storylines there. It'll be fun. I'm picking Cyril Gane, but I will say it. I think like a lot of people in my heart, I sure would like to see Derek Lewis win. He's just one of the more interesting characters in the sport, and the scene of him doing it here in Houston, a town that, he doesn't just live here. He's very, very connected to the city. He does a lot of, great things in the community and that sort of thing. So, I mean, he's really a part of the city. To see him do it here would be a pretty cool scene.
It's funny you mentioned about Derek Lewis because we're going to go next. So, Derek Lewis is the betting underdog tonight. And I went and looked this up. He has been a betting underdog 7 times in his MMA career, and he's 5-2 in those fights. And the 2 fights that he lost were to UFC champion Daniel Cormier and former champ Junior Dos Santos. And people forget that Lewis, did he file like a month and a half notice to Cormier? So you could argue that Lewis might actually be better as an underdog almost in this situation because he's been an underdog plenty of times and he's come out firing.
Well, if you're talking about the odds, and it's a significant underdog line here, right? It's not like just, he's, a plus 120 or something. I mean, right. You can get some huge lines out there. So, Lewis as an underdog, and if you want to play a prop like Lewis by knockout, because if Lewis wins this fight, he's not winning a decision. He's not outpointing Cyril Gane. He's winning by knockout. So if you want to put down a little bit of money, as an investment that maybe you don't mind losing, I think that's a great underdog play. Kind of what I've been saying is, hey, gun to the head scenario, you got to pick the winner. It's Cyril Gane for me. But if you're looking for some value, Lewis and Lewis by knockout, because if he win, and he can, that's what makes this fun. Is that while I say Cyril Gane is the technically better striker, the technically better fighter, and I'm picking him, Derek Lewis absolutely has the ability to stop anybody in the division with one shot. I mean, he has otherworldly type power, and that's what makes this intriguing, and that's what makes it fun. That's what makes a Derek Lewis fight fun, because the guy can be, behind and where and he's still dangerous because one shot can end it all, and it makes it fun. There's always tension.
Yeah, it's plus 390 for Derek Lewis by TKO or knockout. Just straight up, he's plus 270 right now. But part of that is because, for those who don't know, earlier in the week, not to get too gambling on people, but Lewis came in plus 200 at the beginning of the week. And there was apparently a bunch of money that came in on Gane to finish, but not by distance. People were betting on Gane to finish, but not go the distance. A lot of money came in and moved that line a bit. So read into that what you may when it comes to the odds. I always tell people, bet with your head, not with your heart when it comes to this stuff.
True.
The other fight, a couple other fights that are fascinating on this card. First of all, I had no idea that Jose Aldo and Pedro Munoz were the same age. Like, that shocked me when I saw that, because to me, Aldo feels like he's been around for like ever, and Pedro feels like he's been around for like a hot minute. And this is a fight that could very well determine the next trajectory of the bantamweight division, right, John?
Yeah, no question about it. This is a big one. And I'm the same as you. I've fallen victim to the same thing. I say I keep waiting to write off Jose Aldo and be like, because he's been doing it for so long. You keep waiting. Yeah, he's too old now. He can't do it. And here he is still competing at a high level. So, I always worry when it's going to be the one where he's okay, he's done, that's it. But Jose Aldo is still very relevant in the division, an absolute legend. I mean, he is absolutely revered in the sport for both his skills and his character. and he's facing a Brazilian countryman, Pedro Munoz. Who it is? The ages here are shocking. You know, the accomplishments there, but Munoz, the guy that's consistently underrated, man, a guy that has been fighting the elite of the division in recent times as well, and picking up some impressive results. So a very, very key fight here in a division. The bantamweight division right now is pretty much inarguably the best division in the sport. I mean, you're talking from number 1 to number 20 are all absolute killers. You know, it could be anybody on a given night. So a lot will be determined. You know, we're not talking about the next number 1 contender, because there's some people lined up in front of these guys, and the bantamweight division is waiting on a rematch right now. And again, it's got some other contenders. You know, TJ Dillashaw just came back; he's in the mix. I mean, there's a lot of names in the title mix. So neither one of these fighters is going to earn themselves a title shot, but it's a very, very key fight in a very, very stacked division.
The other fight that's fascinating to me on this card, this might be fight of the night tonight, in my opinion. Tasha Torres versus Angela Hill. I mean, that's a fight for two fighters who they love to bang. They love to go. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is just 3 rounds of just a war, and it's like a 29-28 split decision kind of win situation. And both of these women could make a case that if they win this fight, they could, be maybe a fight or two away from fighting for a title themselves.
Yeah, no question. Big fight there at 115 pounds as well. Got a little flavor behind it too. You know, it's a rematch, but it's a rematch of a fight that was, 6 years ago. So they're completely different fighters at this point. But they got a little beef between them just because, they were trying to get the rematch done. It was scheduled at one point. Angela Hill tested positive for COVID, so they had to reschedule everything. They went to reschedule it again, and Tasha was kind of saying, look, I don't really want this fight again. I won it the first time. She's ranked below me. I've already fought her. Like, can you get me somebody else? And so she wasn't signing, and that really upset Angela Hill. It was like, what, are you trying to duck me? Like, I'm better now, and you're trying to hold that result over me, and you won't give it to me. So they had a little back and forth at the press conference, which was nice. But you're right. I mean, Tasha Torres, incredibly skilled athlete. She's fought every champion in the history of the strawweight division, and she's fought nothing but killers her entire career. But now she's on a little bit of a win streak, and Angela Hill always comes out to make it exciting. I'm telling you right now, the main card is phenomenal. This one may not be stacked with big blockbuster superstars, but Michael Chiesa versus Vicente Luque is a key welterweight fight as well that should be action packed. Casey Kinney versus Song Yadong, another bantamweight fight. Talked about how deep that bantamweight division is. It should be action packed. So I do think this pay-per-view tonight is going to be heavy on entertainment value.
UFC 265 tonight is the pay-per-view. John, one more thing before I let you go. Always appreciate chatting with you. I got to ask you about Jon Jones, because he put it out there, champ 2022. Now, in the age of social media, people want to read 200 ways from Sunday what things mean. Dana had his say at the press conference this week. So what is your read on the Jon Jones situation? Because I feel like whenever he does return, whenever that is, this could potentially be the next big boost for the UFC pay-per-view. Like, this is the next superstar on a card, because with Conor McGregor losing, and he's going to be out for God knows how long at this point. Jon Jones is like the guy who's like waiting in the wing, and I feel like the UFC, there's a part of him that's like, John, come back. Dagnabbit, just get back in the ring, dude. And John's just like hanging out there doing his thing. So what is your read on this situation?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? So Dana came out and said, look, if Jon Jones wants to come back, we've offered him a fight with Stipe Miocic, who's also waiting on a fight as well, who also feels like he deserves a title shot. But Jon has made it very clear he only wants to come back and fight for the belt. He doesn't want to come back and have a non-title fight. Obviously, long reigning light heavyweight champion. He believes what he accomplished at 205 pounds should earn him a heavyweight title shot. And honestly, it's hard to argue with him. I mean, you can argue that he's the greatest of all time. So why should he not get a chance to do heavyweight? And that would be the big money fight, especially, here he is coming, trying for the heavyweight title. But right now, that's probably not possible, especially this year. Now you've got this interim title fight. So you got to unify the titles next. I spoke with Dana earlier this week, and he said, look, we will absolutely unify the titles next. We're not going to do other fights with either guy. The winner of this will face Francis Ngannou at some point. We'll get that thing unified. And then, again, Stipe Miocic, they see. So there's just kind of a logjam, unfortunately, at the top of the division. But Jon has said, hey, you know what? It's okay. I got plenty of money in the bank. I'm fine. I don't need to fight. And I'm content waiting a little bit. And listen, honestly, I don't think it's the worst thing for him to wait a little bit and not rush into that heavyweight division. I mean, he's constantly working on putting muscle on, getting bigger, and becoming a legitimate heavyweight. He doesn't want to be a 205er that just kind of moves up and doesn't cut weight and isn't like fully prepared for what he's going to face at heavyweight, because it's definitely going to be a more powerful athlete. It's going to be, people with knockout power. And he's trying to build that frame. He's got two brothers that play at the NFL. They know how to build a frame. So, I think he's going to wait it out. He's going to wait for his opportunity. It'll be next year. And honestly, it's not the worst thing for him physically, especially since he's moving to heavyweight, but it is kind of a shame because I'd like to see him competing more. Like I said, there's an argument that he's the greatest of all time. Losing out on time of him being in the cage kind of sucks, for lack of a better word, but it may be for the greater good in the end.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, his brother Chandler Jones weighs in around about that 280, his NFL weight, and then his brother Arthur was about 300 was his NFL weight. So it's not like Jon Jones comes from a small family, to say the least. John Morgan joined us here on Sports Bash Saturday at MMA Junkie John on Twitter. Give him a follow, as well as MMA Junkie, for all of your MMA and UFC coverage. And he joined us right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. John, enjoy the fights tonight, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, brother. Always a pleasure.